We've high kicking action now as our late movie finds a martial arts master. Babysitting? American Ninja 5.
"1993's The American Ninja 5 is not The American Ninja 5. It feels a bit weird saying that, but it is what it is. This action film with very light comedy elements was originally called American Dragons, and on some TV broadcasts of this film it's still called American Dragons. In fact, it was only towards the very end of production that Canon Pictures decided to tweak the script slightly on some reshoot footage, inserting the words American Ninja a few times to try and tie it into the American Ninja franchise, and changing the name from American Dragons to American Ninja 5 on the promo materials as a way to try and sucker in people who were invested in the American Ninja series. And you know what? Given the absolute yawnathon that the American Ninja 4 was, given that this film currently sits at around a 2.5 to 3.0 rating on IMDb, and given that it literally has nothing to do with the American Ninja movies, barring David Bradley appearing in a leading role, I think this is probably one of my favourite American Ninja movies. The film follows David Bradley playing a completely different ninja expert called Joe. Joe owns a gym in town and lives on a boat. He's a master of ninjutsu and has the ability to use a form of meditation to cause things to explode, teleport, or just die. So he's basically a scanner. Anyway, after a hard day's training, Joe finishes up at the gym and heads back to the marina to chill out at home. But when he gets back, he finds that someone's varnishing his boat. This is Lisa, a woman who owns a boat a couple of slots down from him, who offers to varnish his boat for him. Unfortunately, Joe misheard. He didn't want Lisa to varnish the boat, he wanted her to tarnish the boat. Because of this blunder, Joe's boat is uninhabitable for at least 48 hours, so Lisa offers to let Joe sleep on her boat till it's dry, and even suggests cooking dinner for him. He's not happy with the arrangement, but reluctantly agrees. Shortly after this, we're introduced to the main thrust of the movie, as we meet Simon Glock, owner of Glock Chemicals, a bio company that works in pesticides and poisons. Their chief scientist, Dr. Strobel, has mastered a pesticide called ZB12 that kills insects and leaves no residue on the plant itself, making it essentially safe to eat without having to chemically wash the produce. Unfortunately, a side effect of ZB12 is that, when used in a high enough concentration, it can more or less instantly kill any animal or human. When news hits the lab that Glock wants Strobel to start studying its effect on animals, he storms into a meeting Glock is holding to call the request barbaric. Glock tells Strobel that the main reason for testing is with honourable intentions, and when Strobel refuses to comply, Glock restricts the doctor's movements to his lab. It turns out that Glock is working with the Venezuelan military to develop a bomb full of ZB12 that can be concealed within a suitcase. The plan being to sell these bombs on the black market to reap a massive profit. With Strobel not interested in supporting that, Glock makes the decision that he's going to have to intimidate him into compliance. So, he tells one of his bodyguard henchmen people, who goes by the name Viper, to go and kidnap Strobel's daughter to act as a hostage. Meanwhile, back at the gym, Joe's really going for it when an old friend and mentor, Master Tetsu, drops by. Joe'd completely forgotten that he'd agreed to house sit for Tetsu while he was vacationing. While running through the list of things to keep an eye on, he also casually drops that he also needs Joe to keep an eye on his grandnephew, Hiro. Hiro's an orphan. His mother died during childbirth and his father was killed under mysterious circumstances. He's an introvert, loner, gamer weirdo, but Tetsu trusts that Joe can take care of him and even asks him to maybe work with him a bit on learning the art of ninjutsu. Joe flat out refuses to babysit, but ultimately isn't left with much of a choice when Tetsu uses a smoke bomb to just vanish. So, Joe takes Hiro to go and cancel plans with Lisa, and on the way over to the marina, Hiro opens up a bit more. Turns out, he's a bit annoying. We're talking total Scrappy-Doo energy. Anyway, when the pair arrive at the boat, they find that dinner's already ready and that Lisa had sorta planned the whole thing because she was really interested in getting to know Joe better. Hero, being a bit of a twerp, helps initiate things further, and what was supposed to be a cancelled dinner date ends up being a late night dining and schmoozing session where they all get to know each other quite a bit better. Lisa heads below deck to sort a few things out, and almost immediately she's attacked by Viper, who knocks her out, gets her off the boat and onto the back of a van that speeds off to the airport. Joe goes to look for Lisa, and Hero spots her being taken off the ship. A crazy car chase ensues with Hero driving, and when the pair arrive at the airport, they see Lisa get smuggled onto an aircraft, and they immediately try to smuggle themselves aboard too. Well, Joe does. He tells Hero to head home, but Hero just sneaks into a crate and gets loaded onto the plane anyway. It turns out that the plane's heading to South America, and when it lands, it doesn't take long for Lisa to get offloaded into another van and for Joe to end up being captured by the Venezuelan police and put in jail. Hero manages to evade capture, at which point Joe gives him the job of trying to get to the US Embassy to tell them about what's going on. Back at Glock Chemicals, Lisa and her father are reunited, and Strobel tells Lisa that he's built a prototype of the bomb. His plan is to get Glock and the General all together in the same room and then detonate it, killing himself in the process, but stopping the bomb from making its way onto the black market. Lisa's strongly against the plan, but knows that there isn't really a lot she can do to stop it. She's then taken to a hotel where she's kept in a guarded suite. Hero eventually manages to find/steal a bike, and after a short while finds out Joe is being moved. After a lengthy chase sequence, he manages to get the transfer truck to crash, and when the drivers get out to try and find him, he steals the transfer truck. What they don't realise though is that following the transfer truck was a Jeep with two of Glock's henchmen in, a guy named Flathead and generic baddie A. Anyway, eventually the transfer van gets rammed off the road, Flathead pumps the truck full of bullets, and when they open the back of the truck to see the mess, Joe swings out, having clung to the roof, and promptly beats the crap out of both of them. But before he's able to claim a win, Viper turns up and summons a load of ninjas. Some fight Joe while some kidnap Hero. Joe quickly dispatches his opponents and chases after the ninjas who took Hero. A few fights here and there, and a stint through what looks like an obstacle course follows, and Hero is free again. The pair quickly dust themselves off and start heading out to look for clues again. But the baddies haven't given up just yet, as another chase ensues that results in Joe jumping off a dock into the sea where Flathead machine guns him. When Joe doesn't resurface, Flathead declares, "I got him," something Hero overhears and assumes that Joe is dead. Things look pretty bleak, as Hero heads back into the nearest town to beg people for directions to the US Embassy. But it turns out that Joe isn't dead. I have no idea how, the film doesn't bother to explain, but the important thing is he's alive, and using his ninjutsu skills he's able to bust his handcuffs off and starts to plan his next moves. Meanwhile, Hero stumbles on a local street gang who, as soon as they see him, basically hold him down and threaten to cut his fingers off, but by sheer dumb luck, Joe turns up, beats up the gang, rescues Hero again, and the pair manage to get away. They have a bit of a heart-to-heart when Viper appears again and sets another army of ninjas on the pair. Joe manages to take the ninjas out, but while fighting, Viper manages to hit Hero on the head, knocking him unconscious. While out cold, he has a flashback where he sees Viper kill his father and take an amulet from him. When Hero wakes up, Joe continues the heart-to-heart, and, as if by magic, Master Tetsu appears as a Force ghost. He praises Joe for his work at protecting Hero, and he reveals that Hero's dad intensely trained Hero in the art of ninjutsu, and that with some minor training and meditation, his abilities and powers will return. He also tells Joe that the trauma in Joe's past around failing to protect his little brother will be absolved if he helps Hero unlock his full potential. And so, cue training montages, a foiled attempt at assassinating the head of a global chemicals company, and rainbow ninja outfits galore, as Hero and Joe head out to rescue Lisa and her father, put a stop to illegal arms dealings, and teach Glock and Viper the lesson that, whether young or old, master or student, no one messes with the American Ninja Dragons. American Dragon Ninjas? Just don't mess with David Bradley. My bar for this movie was pretty much on the floor, I'm not gonna lie. While American Ninja 4 had a sense of grandness, it frankly wasted so much time doing the weird split plotline thing, and the fights were so poorly choreographed that, frankly, I was done with the franchise by the time the credits rolled. I enjoyed the first two, the third was fine, and the fourth was a slog that had a couple of good moments sprinkled in throughout. The American Ninja 5 doesn't exactly bring the franchise back to fertile ground, but if we are going to treat this movie as an American Ninja sequel, official or otherwise, then what I will say is, it's not as grand as previous American Ninja movies, but it does a lot more with a lot less, producing something that's arguably the most enjoyable American Ninja movie since Part 2. The script for this is fairly minimalist. Gone are the large-scale ninja training compounds, gone are the baddies looking to create super ninjas or aiming to raise a dictatorship. Here, it's as simple as two not unreasonably written characters ending up pulled into rescuing a love interest and inadvertently stumbling on a nefarious arms deal which they then try to stop. There were elements of this in the American Ninja 4, but it was just that. Elements. Parts of a bigger picture that ultimately got watered down as a result. Here, because the script only really has Lisa's kidnapping and the bomb to work with, it's able to build a greater sense of peril into those elements because that's all that's at stake. It's not trying to spin a lot of plates, so it can take its time in making sure that it gets the elements it is working with just about right. There's a lot less characters to worry about when compared to the other films, which, again, only really helps to keep things focused, because unlike Ninja 4, you're spending the whole movie with only 2 or 3 of roughly 5 characters, which makes it much more coherent when compared to Ninja 4, where you'd spend an ungodly amount of time with one character and then an ungodly amount of time with another. Equally, with this entry, the series embraced a light dash of comedy, which has really gone a long way to help freshen things up a little bit. It doesn't have to be all pouty, serious, moody action. It's allowed to have just a little bit of fun with its characters. And I think this helps massively as it takes the pressure off trying to deliver something as grand and serious as previous installments, instead allowing the audience to just relax and be entertained for a spell. When the previous American Ninja movies did comedy, it was very few and far between and played with a bit of a cooler-than-thou mentality. Here, it feels like the cast are actually having fun, which in turn makes me, the audience member, also feel like I'm having fun. And really, that's all you can ask of a sequel: quality and entertainment. Now, that's not to say that this movie's amazing. The fact it's smaller scale does mean it somewhat fails to really define itself against the other movies in the series, or even the genre really. There are much better ninja action movies out there than this, and just being okay can and will work against it with some people. It suffers from padding in places, and at times it feels like some scenes have had their order rearranged post-shoot, which has created a bit of instability in the script structure. The best example I can think of is Joe agreeing to help train Hiro after Viper knocks Hiro out, only for Tetsu to turn up and tell Joe that he needs to help train Hiro, and for Joe to again agree to help train Hiro. There are a couple of examples of that in this film, where it feels like scenes have been split in half and spread out across the runtime to help give the impression that the characters are in the movie more than they actually are, when in reality, all it really does is make it look like the characters are a bit forgetful and keep repeating points they made 10 to 15 minutes prior. In fact, if we're talking about the script structure, while it does have a problem in terms of deciding what order to run things in, it does cover the basics pretty decently. It has a 3-act structure firmly in place, the pacing's all relatively decent. It maybe slows down a little bit in the middle, but only a smidge, and I'd put that largely down to padding. Examples being Hiro spending a ton of time wandering around looking for the US Embassy, and scenes throughout where Joe fights some ninjas and kicks their arses, only to immediately walk into the next scene where a load of ninjas appear and Joe has to kick their arses. It's by no means the worst I've seen for padding and repetition, but it can't go unnoticed. Throw in some cheesy dialogue that really does sound like it's coming from a kids' TV show. This movie was a PG-13 in the US, so you know exactly the tone they're going for, and depending on your preference for movies that don't take themselves massively seriously, your mileage may vary. I could easily see someone who liked the tone and vibe of the American Ninja movies coming to this film and being very disappointed that it's chosen to go down a lighter, less life or death route. But I, for one, really rather welcomed it. It's a change of pace after two movies that felt very samey and had similar issues that made them, well, a bit boring in all honesty. This isn't bogged down with continuity, and to me, it's a fun and sturdy enough work that I'm not ashamed to say I quite got on with. The script was written by Greg Latter, George Saunders and John Bryant. Greg has 25 writing credits to his name, with credits including Cold Harvest, Cyborg Cop and Delta Force 3 The Killing Game. His last credit was in 2017. George and John have 5 and 4 writing credits respectively, and both have pretty much worked together on everything they've written with the exception of one extra credit for George in 1995, and John's last credit was 1994. Highlights include Scanner Cop and Martial Outlaw. On directing duties, we have Bob Bralver. He has 17 directing credits, mainly for TV, including Knight Rider, The A-Team and Dragnet. He's really more of a stuntman in honesty. In that field, he has 178 credits, with highlights including Roadhouse and Darkman. And on the direction front, I mean, it tries. It's hardly the most breathtaking watch I've ever sat through, I'll be completely honest. I suppose the best way I could describe it is, it's above acceptable, not exactly show-stopping, but it does have the odd flourish in there that makes me think the director was trying to turn out something good with whatever resources he had. While the general scene-by-scene direction is rather by the numbers, it does have the odd nice moment where it goes above and beyond. The various car chases that happen throughout the film are usually the ones that stand out in terms of doing things that made me go, ooh, this is a bit more interesting. Shots set in the hotel near the end where Hiro and Joe go to rescue Lisa also impressed. It's not groundbreaking stuff, but reasonable with the occasional moment of great is, for me at least, always going to trump good but underwhelming. There was nothing here that blew my socks off, but there was enough to keep me on board. The fight choreography is a little underwhelming, but it is a lot better than how it was handled in American Ninja 4. They go for masked contact with occasional soft contact blows, which, while the choreography itself is a little underwhelming, they've made the probably wise decision to go for fast martial artistry rather than anything more intricate, which is safe but ultimately a bit disappointing. They do at least handle the technicals around masking those contact shots quite well. Ninja 4 was awful at that, with shots of actors not even touching each other making it into the final cut. Here, at least it looks like the punches and kicks are landing at least 90% of the time, and it feels like there's weight behind the attacks as well. It may not be pushing boundaries, but I always admire solid attempts. The cine is in a bit of a similar place to the direction. It lacks scale, but it's ambitious, and I respect that. Sequences are fairly basic, but the cine team behind this do have a nice eye for composition, and there's some decent shots making up these sequences. While there isn't really a lot of experimentation here, I'm more than happy with acceptable cine structured into competent sequences that do occasionally strive to go a bit above and beyond. The cine around the fight sequences is tight and focused on action, the chase scenes are edited swiftly with a variety of shots driving emphasis on the fast-paced nature of the chase, and there's even just the odd nice addition in play too, like establishing shots of the aeroplane Joe and Hiro hop aboard mid-flight and shots of the village's surroundings to help really sell us on the locations. I don't think it'll exactly blow anyone away, but I can't knock it really all that much because it's not doing what it does badly, it's just trying its best to do what it can with what it has. Performance-wise, David Bradley as Joe is pretty solid. With this being an action comedy, he's playing things with a slightly lighter edge here than when compared to Sean in the other American Ninja movies. It's not his greatest performance, but for this genre of film, I think he just about does the job right. I think he comes across as warm when he needs to be and serious when it's time to throw hands, so I won't fault him here. I also have to really give some credit to Lee Reese on this one. I don't like to comment particularly on child actors, I make it a bit of a rule. But I will say here that Reese takes the character that could have been in the wrong hands quite insufferable, and by the end of the movie has really made him into something I actually thought was pretty decent. Given that this was his first full feature credit, I find it all the more impressive. I thought he did a good job with this one, and I'm glad to see that he's still fairly active, with a credit as recently as 2012. I think where the film falls down really is with its handling of the villains, with James Liu and Clement von Frankenstein, seriously that's his actual name, as Viper and Glock respectively, just being a little too generic for my taste. I don't know, I just didn't really get anything distinct off them. They didn't really set themselves up as unique or interesting characters. They're pretty much just generic martial arts and businessman style baddies. It would have maybe been nice to have a bit more depth, complexity, or points of interest with our antagonists beyond one killed Hero's dad and the other wants to sell bioweapons to South American arms dealers. They work with what they have well enough, I just wanted a bit more from them, honestly. The rest of the cast are alright, they do a decent turn in this, but as has been the story throughout this thing, I feel like they do good enough to give them some praise, but not good enough to really take things to the next level where I'm enthusiastically endorsing what they've done here. They all work with the dialogue as best they can, they all use the set space as best they can, and I think with the director working as a stuntman, he's had enough experience working with directors to be able to help steer the cast towards giving a decent turn. I can't say fairer than they did the job and just about hit the spot. And finally, the soundtrack, and it's Panpipe Fever. Seriously, this whole thing is rocky poppy numbers just drenched in panpipes. It's wall-to-wall panpipes. So many panpipes. It's fine. I'd have liked a little bit more range personally, as after a while all it does is start to sound a bit samey, but it's just about fine. It does have that early 90s cheap and cheerful edge to it, which does help set the mood, but doesn't really help to kick this thing into high gear. Especially when it really needed something distinct and actiony to help tie the cine direction and performances all together. It's passable. American Ninja 5 was released in the UK on VHS in 1993 by Cannon's own distribution, and in a move that still got my jaw on the floor, I have to bring the BBFC into this. You see, this movie came out at a point in time when the BBFC were still all in on banning anything to do with ninjas or ninja weaponry because they were scared that kids would see it and immediately all go out and become ninjas. Seriously. Stop laughing. Anyway, American Ninja 5 was initially refused a certificate in the UK uncut, and the BBFC requested 1 minute and 11 seconds of cuts in order to secure an 18 rating in the UK. Bearing in mind, ladies and gents, that this got released in the US uncut as a PG-13. Do you know what's even more wild? A year earlier in 1992, Zombie Flesh Eaters was resubmitted for classification after being banned for 8 years from being shown in the UK, and they passed it with an 18 certificate with 1 minute and 46 seconds of cuts. Meaning that in one of the most bizarre turns I've ever seen, the BBFC thought that a PG-13 action comedy about two people beating up ninjas with no blood or gore was only slightly better than a full-on graphic zombie movie that was banned for 8 years and registered as a video nasty with blood, gore, mutilation, eye gouging and full frontal nudity. Jesus Christ. As far as I can see, it didn't receive a DVD release in the UK, but it did get multiple releases across Europe between 2002 and 2004, some cut, some uncut. But outside of that, that's it. No Blu-ray release that I can find, and it's not on any streaming services that I can see either. So, if you live in the UK, it's a cut VHS or bust, I'm afraid. Had the American Ninja 5 been an official entry in the series, I'd have actually been pretty comfortable with things ending here. While previous entries were grand, bombastic and full on, this entry kind of pulls things back to what I want from a series like this. a decent amount of fighting, a basic but engaging and somewhat charismatic plot, and a lively cast who bring the script alive. While I absolutely have to say that it could be done miles better in almost every regard, with it at times really bordering on becoming a generic action movie with a hint of comedy gaffer tape to it, given where we've come from, I was happy to just have a stable end product that didn't put me to sleep, made me smile a couple of times, and gave the cast a decent opportunity to work on some good character development. American Ninja 5 probably won't win many people's hearts, but I'd say if you enjoyed previous American Ninja movies but felt 4 kind of left things a bit flat, this might just be the do-over you needed.